Good afternoon. My name is Guntram Mueller, and I'm with Boston Downwinders and also with Massachusetts Peace Action. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to all of you and also all of you. I want to talk briefly about this business of the danger that we do face. In other words, when I first heard that Pilgrim is closing, I said, yay, and I said, whoop, 4 years? That's not good. We need to close now because the dangers are here and they are now. Let me just give you 3 examples. You've heard the Nuclear Regulatory Commission calls this or rates this as the least safe reactor in the country, tied with these 2 other ones owned by the same company. Why did the NRC do this? One of the reasons is because of the frequency of these high-speed emergency shutdowns. Now, this doesn't sound very good. In fact, the name for them is SCRAM, which might tell you something. There have been 7 of these SCRAMs over the last 3 years. The Entergy company has never figured out, according to our governor, what is the root cause of these emergency shutdowns. Well, that should give you pause. It means we don't really know what's happening, but we're using the plant anyway. Nothing to worry about. That's called Russian roulette. That's warning number 1. Secondly, in 1992, the Boston Globe reported a few weeks ago, in 1992, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission told Pilgrim that there was a danger that the electronics that control the reactor are vulnerable to damage if there's a fire in the control room or in certain other places, which could result in the loss of control of the reactor. Now just think about that, the loss of control of the reactor. That's warning number 2. So we've had 2 now, right? Another example occurred on January 27th, this last winter, during that big snowstorm that we had. Some of you may remember shoveling that snow. Well, during that snow, there was 60-mile-an-hour winds, and the switch yard failed. The switch yard is a thing that allows you to get electricity to the nuclear power plant, which is critical, for instance, for running the cooling system. If the cooling system's out, you have a meltdown, end of story. You've got Fukushima. Well, fortunately, the replacement power in the form of diesel generators worked fine. Another diesel, however, which makes the highly compressed air pressure, did not start. Now, that was a big problem because that air pressure is used for the instrumentation of what's happening inside the reactor. If you want to know what's happening inside the reactor, you have to have the instrumentation working. And one of the things that was not working at that point is the level of water inside the reactor. That's critical. Also, the air pressure runs the safety relief valves. They weren't able to be operated. So not only did we not know what's happening in the reactor, we couldn't do much about it anyway. All right, so we have 3 warnings, 3 big warnings that we received. How many warnings will it take before we get the point? Now, Senator Wolf mentioned earlier that the municipalities on the Cape and on the islands have all had voting questions on Pilgrim. In every one of those municipalities, they voted to shut down Pilgrim. Now, 2 weeks from now, the city of Newton will have a similar ballot on the question. Now the question may occur to you, gee, Newton isn't that far away from Pilgrim? It's exactly 38 miles from Pilgrim. And Boston, I mean this place right here, is exactly 35 miles away from Pilgrim. That may seem nice and safe, but remember the fact that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission recommended, when Fukushima was taking place, it recommended that Americans in Japan have a 50-mile immediate evacuation zone around Fukushima. So 38 and 35 doesn't seem nearly as safe anymore. I want to come back to that event on January 27th. Because, as I mentioned, the Entergy, the operators of the plant, no longer knew the amount of water in the reactor. That's critical. That's absolutely critical. Because you know how a meltdown happens? A meltdown happens if there's not enough water. And what happens is the fuel rods get hotter and hotter and hotter, finally melt down into the bottom of the reactor. And then what happens is that instead of having nuclear reactions taking place in a controlled manner over the course of several years, you're going to have an instant nuclear reaction down in the bottom of the reactor, generating loads and loads of heat instantly, and generating lots of radioactivity which goes blowing out the top. Now you might ask, how long would it take to get here to Boston, for example? Well, the storm had winds of 60 miles an hour. So we know exactly, it would take exactly 35 minutes to get to Gardner Auditorium. 35 minutes. All right? Now, I'm just going to end with drawing a little picture for you. So, if the water in the reactor had been low, we wouldn't know it because we didn't have the instrumentation. If it had been low, then the fuel rods would overheat, they would melt down ultimately, you'd have this huge radiation going out, and well, I guess sirens would go off, or somehow we'd find out at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is when this was happening, at 2 o'clock in the morning, to the middle of a snowstorm, we'd all try to leave. So imagine 4.5 million people, the eastern part of Massachusetts down to the Cape, 4.5 million people trying to leave within 35 minutes. And you know how far we'd get? We probably wouldn't have made it out of our own driveway because of the snowstorm. That's the picture, unfortunately. That is the reality. Thank you.